Luis Garcia was the worst newcomer that the Boston Red Sox got to the team in 2024.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And the best part is it is completely free. So you might as well tune in because Locked On is your team every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome to the show and happy Thursday. As the free agency talks continue to ramp up, this is the time of year where it's all speculation. What is a team going to do in the offseason to improve? Are they going to add pieces? Are they going to be super aggressive? Are they going to try to trade for guys who are going to be better for them in the future? Every team is in a different spot right now. And this is that time of year where you start to hear the rumors of who's linked to who, and you start to speculate who's going where. But as we await the free agency news and moves that the Red Sox hopefully do make, we can still talk about the 2024 season and how that went. And obviously the Red Sox had their fair share of injuries and other things that went on in 2024 that prevented them from being as successful as they possibly could have been. Guys struggling and not really having a lot of opportunities to be able to maximize that potential and grow in the best way that they could. And I think the coaching was part of that. Obviously, not having the best bullpen coach in place to help out the guys in the pen. And then also from an offensive standpoint with Pete Fatsi as the hitting coach, I don't really think he's the guy to elevate the offense to the point that it really needs to get to. So you take all of those factors into consideration. And for me, part of the reason the Red Sox weren't successful in 2024 is because they didn't get the best group of newcomers, whether that was via trade, free agency, guys they acquired before the season, guys they acquired partway through the season. They didn't really get that best group of guys that they possibly couldn't have gotten. And on today's show, I'm going to be going over all of that, talking about the newcomers that came to the team in 2024, guys who I liked that performed, guys who didn't really perform, and where the Red Sox missed and where they could have done better. So you first think about last offseason. When we as Red Sox fans had high hopes for this team, they decided to part ways with Justin Turner, who was a big part of the team in 2023. And then we're wondering how they're going to replace his productivity. And then they trade Alex Verdugo to the Yankees, and they bring in 3 pitchers in return, one of which was Greg Weisser, who got the opportunity to pitch on the major league roster for the Red Sox in 2024, but wasn't overly impressive. He pitched you a 3.13 ERA for Boston with a 4-2 record. But the thing with him was that's a little bit deceiving because there were games that he had where he was a complete mess. And when he was giving up runs, it was like there was no stopping it and no fixing it. But he had other days where he looked super sharp and super clean. I mean, for example, he was at the point where he was giving up a lot more runs at home than he was on the road. He gave up 13 earned runs at home versus 9 on the road in the opportunities that he got to pitch out of the Red Sox bullpen. And the frustrating thing about him was he was just never consistent. And when the Red Sox got him, they obviously felt like they saw something in him that they liked, and they wanted him to perform a little bit better than he did. I don't imagine that the Greg Weiser that they got was the guy who they were hoping to see, because this guy comes in and he wasn't a super reliable bullpen piece, and that was disappointing for Red Sox fans. So when you think about newcomers who came to the team, Greg Weiser is certainly not at the top of my list of guys who were able to impress. But on the flip side of that, they did get a prospect in Nicholas Judas. Too soon to tell what he's going to turn into. But Richard Fitts was the third pitcher that they got in that deal for Alex Verdugo. And to me, he is in second place for me in terms of best newcomers in 2024, because this guy impressed. He went out there and made a few starts for Boston. Very small sample size here with him, so it's really hard to conclude exactly if that's what he's going to be moving forward. But the last start that he made, he struggled. This was in the last week of the season when the Red Sox were trying to still battle for a wild card spot, and they were literally hanging on by a thread. And he went out there and he didn't pitch well. But other than that, the other couple starts that he made for the Boston Red Sox, he impressed. So in that regard, I really liked what I saw from him, and it leaves me feeling excited about the future with him on the team. And if Fitz is somebody that the Red Sox want to experiment with a little bit and see if he is better off pitching in the rotation or in the bullpen, I think they now have the opportunity to be able to do that experimenting and say, okay, we like him better here and he's effective here, so let's throw him here. And I think in 2025, we're going to see a lot of experimenting when it comes to Fitz in terms of where it makes sense to put him. But he did impress in his starts and was able to pitch shutouts and absolutely dominate the opposing offense, which is very promising for a pitching staff that was very shaky for a lot of the season. And they had a bunch of guys in there who weren't exactly super reliable. And then you take a guy like Fitz and throw him in there, and he is reliable. And it's like, wow, this is a breath of fresh air. And you could even throw Luis Guerrero into that category, a guy who came into the Red Sox bullpen and got called up from AAA and was pitching really well at the end of the season, somebody who was able to really impress and showcase that he had the ability to be a key piece in this bullpen. Again, a small sample size and another guy who we have to see more of. But I would throw him into that same category as Fitz, of another young pitcher who the Red Sox can work with and hopefully can prosper and turn into a big piece for the Red Sox pitching staff in terms of the arms that they are throwing. And speaking of Luis Guerrero, you have newbies that got to dip their feet in the water this year for the Boston Red Sox, guys who were at the lower levels but got to get called up because of injuries, like Mickey Gasper being one of those players. And he really struggled when he was up in the majors, which is really sad. For the longest time, we were waiting for him to get that first major league hit, and he didn't exactly come through and do that. And fans were wondering, is he ever going to get that major league hit? And for him, I felt like it was a premature call up. I mean, the Red Sox were kind of backed into the wall at that point because they had all these injuries and they needed somebody to come up and play. And he had impressed enough in the minors where they wanted to give him that chance. So they called him up. He didn't perform in the majors. And then they sent him back down to AAA. And the thing with him that I wonder is he going to get another chance in the majors? Probably not at this point, because I think the Red Sox gave him enough of a chance at this point now to where I don't think they'd really feel confident to call him back up again unless they absolutely have to and somebody gets hurt and they really need him to come up. But in general, I don't think he'll be used. He does play both catcher and first base, but even so, I don't think that will necessarily give him a leg up in terms of his productivity moving forward. I don't think they really trust that he'll be somebody that will be part of the future. So that was a bit of a disappointing newbie that came into the team in 2024. But Nick Sogard was another position player, and he actually impressed when he got called up because he was able to put up competitive offensive numbers for this Red Sox team. And in his debut, he actually recorded a hit for Boston, and he was getting hits in a lot of opportune situations. And he's an infielder who the Red Sox could kind of throw around. He played a little bit of third base, played a lot of second base, played some shortstop. So he proved that he's the type of infielder who's versatile, who they can kind of throw in there into a few different positions. And I was glad that he was able to get that type of exposure because now the Red Sox know, okay, even if our infield situation is solidified for 2025, he's somebody who's a good option to call up at a different point in the season if we need him later on, if somebody gets injured and can't play. We can call on him to go in there and get the job done and be a guy who we feel like has the capability of filling that role for whoever he goes in for, because he made his at bats meaningful. And that was the biggest thing about Sogard that stood out to me, was that he had meaningful at bats and he was able to go out there and not really look like a rookie and look more like a guy who felt comfortable out there and just wanted to have impactful plate appearances. So that's what I really liked about Sogard. He's another newbie who I liked that I would put towards the top of the list in terms of effectiveness, whereas Mickey Gasper has to go towards the bottom because he was unable to deliver in that situation. So with this team that had lots of newbies in 2024, regardless of where they came from, free agency, trade, or just got called up from the minors, several players performed and several didn't. And coming up, I'm going to be revealing the weakest newbie to me for the Boston Red Sox and what made him as disappointing as he was. You can make lots of money with FanDuel if you're into sports betting, and you can get ready to tackle the NFL action now with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. My husband is always on FanDuel making money, making a variety of different bets on different sports, and that could absolutely be you too. In talking about the Boston Red Sox in 2024, the team obviously made moves in different capacities, whether that was through free agency and signing guys, trading for players, and calling up guys from the minors who impressed. And in the discussion of talking about some of those players and refreshing your memory on newbies that we got to see in 2024, I don't think anybody could forget about Danny Jansen, a guy who the Red Sox, in a surprising move, got in an attempt to add another strong right-handed bat to the lineup, and they optioned Reese McGuire. He ended up being DFA'd and wasn't claimed, so then he got sent back down to AAA for the Red Sox. And they brought in Danny Jansen as another catcher to be on the roster with Connor Wong, and he was more meant to be the backup catcher. His defense was way better than Connor Wong's, though, and that was already known coming in that he would provide a bit of an upgrade defensively, but his bat did not turn out to be what the Red Sox wanted it to be. He hit just 205 on the season, over 278 at bats. But when he came to Boston, he was just unable to be effective. And in the last 28 days of the season, he batted just 154 with a 389 on base percentage and 269 slugging. It was pretty bad. He just had one home run and one RBI in that time. And the thing with him was he could not see right-handed pitching well. Versus righties, he only batted 193 compared to 237 versus lefties, which is normal because of him being a right-handed bat. They wanted him to be able to hit better against lefties since the Red Sox as a lineup as a whole struggle against left-handed pitching. So that's what he was brought in to do. But even so, that number was not high enough. Hitting just 237 against lefties when that is supposed to be your strength is not going to cut it for a team that really needed the right-handed hitting. And he had good competitive numbers at Fenway that he was putting up. In his career, he would hit really well at Fenway Park. So that's why the Red Sox felt like they could trust him and he was somebody they could bring in and could be reliable because of the fact that he consistently hit well when he was in a Boston Red Sox location and playing at Fenway for another team. And that was the thing. So then when he gets to Boston and he is taking these at bats, it's almost like he completely fell off or some sort of switch flipped in his head. I don't know, but he was a different hitter. He was a guy who couldn't make a lot of contact. And when he was with the Blue Jays, I just remember him being able to hit consistently in Boston. So it was just definitely upsetting that he wasn't able to be the guy that the Red Sox wanted him to be. In August, he batted 146, and in September and October, just a slim 143. The season obviously ended at the end of September, so keep that in mind. So the October portion of the September/October stats does not apply here. So if you think about just the month of September, just a mere 143 batting average. He hit 214 in July, which of course was around the time that he came to Boston and everything just went downhill from there. So he was definitely another disappointing player that the Red Sox acquired this season. But the absolute worst acquisition for the Red Sox in 2024, the player who came in and was just downright awful for this team, was pitcher Luis Garcia that the Red Sox acquired at the trade deadline from the Angels. He pitched to a 4.88 ERA on the season, and that honestly doesn't seem as bad as what he performed in Boston. Why? Because that also incorporates his stats when he was with the Angels earlier in the season, and he was pitching well with the Angels, and that's why his numbers were a lot lower. And then because he didn't pitch well in Boston, that number increased significantly to the point where there was a big difference in his ERA in the first couple months of the season versus the end of the season. And the biggest thing for me that bothered me about Garcia was that it wasn't like he was just giving up a run or two every time he was out there. And we said, all right, well, we can't really rely on him to be consistent. This was a beatdown the majority of the time he went out there. He would go out there and give up runs like it was his day job. It was so bad. And then he, of course, went on the injured list. So the Red Sox didn't have him pitching for a bit. And then he came back in the last week of the season and shoved because presumably, since he was going to be a free agent, he wanted to leave a good taste in some teams' mouths so that he could actually get a deal for the next season. But it was really disappointing because based on the numbers that he put up with the Angels, the Red Sox, I think, thought that he was going to perform better than he did. Obviously, they assumed that they were getting the guy who pitched well with the Angels that could help them out in the second half of the season. But the problem was he made the bullpen worse. And ever since that trade deadline, the team declined as a whole, and the bullpen was the biggest reason for that. So him coming in here and making the bullpen worse was totally not ideal, especially because of the fact that the Red Sox gave up 4 players for him, all minor league players in first baseman Nico Cavadas, outfielder Matthew Lugo, and pitchers Jefferson Vargas and Ryan Zefferhan. So 4 prospects, but Lugo and Cavadas were the real deal. And they gave up a lot for a pitcher who stunk in the second half of the season for them and wasn't able to help them get closer to getting a wild card spot, but actually rather helped them get further from a wild card spot. And the reason I'm putting him at the very bottom of the list of newcomers to the Boston Red Sox roster in 2024 is because of the expectations for him compared to what the reality was of what he actually gave us. At least if you look at other guys in the roster, like, yes, Danny Jansen didn't perform to the level that they needed him to perform at, but what he gave us still wasn't quite as bad and season altering as what Garcia gave us, because this man could not be relied on in the slightest. And it was tough for Alex Cora because he was one of the guys that had a prevalent role in the bullpen. He was a guy the Red Sox traded for that they were relying on. He was a guy that the front office expected to be utilized regularly out of that pen. And when the bullpen was being overused and guys were getting fatigued, they had no choice but to throw guys like him. And so that was really disappointing and too detrimental to this team and its bullpen as a whole, to the point where it caused lots of problems with this Red Sox pen, because if he gave up 5 runs, the game was basically over at that point. And it just led to game after game of frustration because he would give up some big lead that the Red Sox had, or even if it was a tie game and he gave up a few runs, it just never worked out that he was able to give the Red Sox what they needed. His ERA, to give you some perspective, with the Angels was a 3.71. So obviously not great, but it was okay. And that is a number that can get the job done. If this guy came in with a 3.71 ERA to pitch in Boston in the second half of the season, I would have said, okay, he's decent, like definitely not a high leverage reliever that you use. He doesn't get classified in with your best relief arms, but he is a guy who can go out there and at least take care of business more often than not. But I was wrong, because his ERA in Boston was an 8.22. 8.22. That is horrific. To jump from a 3.71 to an 8.22, that really is what did it for him. And it goes to show how much worse he was in Boston than he was in LA. And obviously, when the Red Sox traded for him, they did not have a pitcher in mind who was going to throw an over 8 ERA. That just wasn't what they pictured. But unfortunately, that is the reality of what happened. And the Red Sox got stuck with this guy who couldn't contribute. And then you even added another pitcher at the deadline in Lucas Sims, who also didn't contribute as much as the Red Sox wanted him to. 4.38 ERA on the season, which again is nothing special, but is decent and again gets the job done. So when he came to Boston, he also wasn't as reliable as people wanted him to be. He had ups and downs. He had nights where he would pitch well and be lights out, other nights where he was really shaky and gave up some runs. And then he also got injured. So at the end of the day, these pitchers that they got at the trade deadline did not work out. Obviously, they also got James Paxton, who only was able to make one start and not get through a lot of it because he got injured. Obviously, that's unfortunate. No way the Red Sox could have controlled that. But at the end of the day, they missed a lot on their trade deadline acquisitions. And that's something I'm going to be looking to going into 2025 is what are their trade deadline acquisitions going to look like? And are they going to be able to hit on those this time? Because Luis Garcia, to me, was the worst player that they brought in some capacity to this Boston Red Sox team in 2024. And on the flip side of that, who was the best, most productive guy that the Red Sox brought in to the team in 2024? I will be going over that next. The World Series, Super Bowl, the Olympics. The world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. There are so many different reasons why I can say it's important to have your life insurance secured. But one of the most obvious ones is that you don't know what's going to happen when. So it's really important to make sure that you're settling that today if you haven't already. And that can be done way easier with SelectQuote. In sports, winning is everything. That's why you always need a good strategy to keep you moving towards the goalposts. Winning strategies for life are just as important. And that's why on my team, I have life insurance through SelectQuote to protect my legacy and my family's financial future. SelectQuote is one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, helping over 2 million customers find over $700 billion in coverage since 1985. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockdown. Go to selectquote.com/lockdown today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockdown. I am telling you, you will feel a lot better if you get this squared away. So make sure that you jump on it and go to SelectQuote today and take full advantage of everything they have to offer. On today's show, I've been giving a full overview of the newcomers that the Red Sox brought to the table in 2024, talked about some of the guys who contributed, some of the guys who didn't, and I have also revealed my worst newcomer to the Boston Red Sox in 2024, which was Luis Garcia. I mean, what a horrific run that he had in Boston. I mean, this guy just could not record outs and would just give up runs constantly. And that was frustrating. But on the flip side, you have to think about who the best newcomer was to the Boston Red Sox in 2024. Now, when making this decision, I thought about everything that he provided. This was somebody who provided a spark that the Red Sox needed and provided some much needed depth in an area the Red Sox needed it. And that to me was Tyler O'Neill, a guy who brought a lot of power to a lineup that didn't have a lot of it prior to that, and a much needed right-handed bat because the Red Sox lineup was full of left-handed hitters. Tyler O'Neill batted .241 on the season with 31 home runs, 99 hits, 74 runs scored, and 61 RBIs over 411 at-bats. He also had 4 stolen bases and an on-base percentage of .336 with a .511 slugging percentage. But that 31 home runs stood out to me because obviously he was injured for part of the season. He did not get to play in every game or in as many games as the Red Sox wanted him to, and he still hit 31 home runs. Imagine if he was healthy all season long, he probably would have hit a lot more. And that was really helpful for Boston because the Red Sox haven't had a lot of hitters on their roster who could consistently hit home runs at that rapid of a pace as we saw O'Neill do it. And that was exciting to be a Red Sox fan and watch because I was like, wow, what is this? A guy who's hitting home runs a lot for the Boston Red Sox? We're not really familiar with that as fans. And for him, he was able to provide a lot of things that the Red Sox needed. And to me, that's super valuable because if they didn't have O'Neill, they wouldn't have had that power in the lineup. And the home runs that he hit, if you take those away, they probably lose quite a few more games because his home runs won them quite a few games single-handedly. And he was able to be the version of Tyler O'Neill that we were hoping to see. He did struggle a bit defensively, but that's because he switched positions in the outfield from what he was used to playing. So you have to cut him a little bit of slack there. But overall, and especially with his offense, that was what the Red Sox were hoping from him. In the last 28 days of the season, he did bat just 177, but again, he was fatigued, he had been injured, and he didn't have a lot of opportunities to get those at-bats in. So I'm not really looking at those numbers and saying, wow, Tyler O'Neill was horrific at the end of the season, because he certainly was not. Versus right-handed pitching, he batted .209, but versus lefties, he batted .313. That .313 alone was the biggest difference to me for this Boston Red Sox team when it came to having O'Neill, because a lot of guys in the Red Sox lineup could not touch lefties. So the fact that he was going out there and batting over 300 against left-handed pitching created a lot of versatility within the Red Sox lineup. And that's why it's difficult thinking about him not being in a Red Sox uniform in 2025. And I think the chances are pretty high that that will be the case because he is a free agent. And I think with the Red Sox outfield situation right now, they have a lot of talent in the outfield. So I don't think they would necessarily prioritize bringing him back when they would rather prioritize other things like pitching and maybe focusing on signing Juan Soto. Because if they sign Juan Soto, he most definitely wouldn't come back because, again, they have so many outfielders already on this team. So I'm not really seeing him coming back, and they need to find a way to replace that right-handed power if he doesn't come back. But to me, this was a win for Breslow. This was one of the first moves that Breslow made in his tenure with the Boston Red Sox was when he acquired O'Neill. And that proved to be really good and really successful for this Boston Red Sox team. Did he strike out a lot? Yes, for sure. We saw tons of swings and misses from the guy, but that's not a Tyler O'Neill thing. That's not really uncommon when it comes to hitters who are used to hitting home runs a lot. They also do typically tend to rack up the strikeouts. I mean, look at Aaron Judge. He hits a lot of home runs, but he also strikes out a lot. It's pretty common. And yes, it was frustrating when he struck out, but he would make up for that by hitting them 500 feet. So that became the difference in that for this Red Sox team. And to me, I was really excited to watch O'Neill all year, and he was somebody who brought an energy and a spark that this Red Sox team needed. And even when they were struggling and they were losing games, he always seemed to be a bright spot because even if they were down like 5-0, he would rip a home run to make it 5-1 or 5-2. And even if the game was still out of reach, I would feel like, wow, Tyler O'Neill just gave the Red Sox momentum going into the next game. So there were certain little moments he had that made me feel energetic about the Red Sox, and I feel like he absolutely won that. That was the best move to me that Breslow has made so far in his tenure when it comes to newcomers. So we'll see what happens there, but they absolutely do need to find a replacement bat for Tyler O'Neill if they don't bring him back. And I'm hoping that they bring somebody in who is able to be effective in the same way that he was. But I do appreciate you tuning in to Locked On Red Sox and making it your first listen today. Be sure to next tune in to Lock On MLB with Sully, aka Paul Sullivan, who will keep you up to date on all things going on across Major League Baseball. So if you are looking to continue to listen to baseball shows and get your baseball fix, I highly recommend Locked On MLB. Sully is so funny, and his show is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So make sure you check that out. As always, keep the faith, go Red Sox, and I will catch you on the flip side.